But one of the things that's really striking about this case is just how incredibly incompetent the investigation was in this case. You have all sorts of evidence that should have been collected that allegedly wasn't. You have a small town police department, Millington Police Department, which in a case of this magnitude, you would expect to call in the TBI or the Shelby County Sheriff's Office or some other larger investigative agency to assist them with processing the crime scene and talking to witnesses. But instead they kept it very tight and close. So that raises a red flag for me. And when you look at the crime itself, it's a personal crime. This is somebody who has a lot of anger and a lot of rage at this woman. And it's a crime that you would typically see in a domestic situation. In my mind, I'm looking at a client who has no motive, who's maintained his statement for now 34 years that he went in to help because that's what he was raised to do. His intellectual disability comes into play when we look at the decisions he made when he went into that apartment. And what he sees is like out of a horror movie, blood everywhere. You have the little girl Lacie, who's already dead, Nicholas, who's alive, and Charisse Christopher, who's also still alive, with the knife is sticking out of her neck, and Pervis, to help, goes and lifts the knife out of her neck. Now, I wouldn't do that, you wouldn't do that, but he was freaked out, 20 years old, and just wanted to help. He cut himself on his palm, and there are pictures of the cut on his palm. They're nicks. They weren't even bleeding when he got arrested. He went to the phone, and he couldn't think to dial 911. All he could think is to dial 411. His fingerprints are on the phone, but there's no blood on that phone. If he had been the assailant picking up the phone, there would have been blood on the phone. When you look at his pants, they're virtually clean. This woman was stabbed 80 times. Also, her children were stabbed, and there's blood all over this apartment. How are his pants virtually clean? There's some blood on his shirt, but it does not appear to be the type of blood that would be like a splatter from a stab. It's more like transfer. So he looks outside and he sees the police officer driving up, and he realizes, I'm in here all by myself. They're gonna think I did this. He runs out and first says, I'm the one that called you, I'm the one that called you, and then realizes, oh no, I gotta get out of here. He shoves the police officer and he runs from the scene. He runs and he hides in a trash can for a while, and then he runs to his friend who's just 2 blocks away from the crime scene, and he's arrested within an hour. It wasn't a great caper, right? He didn't go hide well. And that was it as far as the police were concerned. They had their man, they charged him, case closed. At trial, they claimed that Pervis was on drugs. The motive was that he was high on drugs, had been looking at a Playboy magazine, and this caused him to be looking for sex from a white woman. She rebuffed him, and then he just committed this crime. Well, now if you're going to say that Pervis is shooting up drugs, where's the needle marks? He didn't do this for the first time that day if he was an IV drug user. Where are the needle marks? Where are the photographs of the needle marks or the description of the needle marks? Nowhere to be found. Then I meet Pervis's family, and I learn that he has no history of drug abuse. His mother came to the police station the night that he was arrested and begged the police to test him for drugs. Said, I know my son didn't do this. If you think he did it, I want you to test him for drugs. And she was pretty adamant about it, to the point where her husband, Elder Payne, will tell you that he was afraid she was going to get arrested herself. And they refused to test him. I should pause a little bit about the Playboy thing too, because I talked to his cousin who was with him that day, and he's like, it wasn't Playboy, it was Jet magazine. It was Eddie Murphy for Beverly Hills Cop 2 on the cover. This is not a magazine that's going to cause somebody to slaughter a family. Then the bells go off. Oh, well, they had to make it a Playboy because they needed to make it racier and they needed to make it a white woman. And so Pervis gets convicted. So we asked to test all these pieces of evidence, including the victim's fingernail scrapings. The state says, oh no, the fingernail scrapings, we don't know where they are. They've vanished. They've never provided an explanation for what happened to those fingernail scrapings in that period of time. One of her fingernails actually is pulled back almost to the quick. So we know that the DNA of the perpetrator would be under those fingernail scrapings. We did get DNA testing of other evidence, including the knife, the murder weapon. There is male DNA on the handle of the knife, and the report says that Pervis's DNA is not on the handle of the knife. This is common sense. If you stab somebody 80 times, you would expect the DNA to be on that knife. The problem with that evidence is it's just a few alleles, a few markers. So it's not enough to put in the FBI database. We know that Pervis doesn't have those markers, that's how we can exclude him, but we can't get a match because the FBI requires, I think it's 10 markers or something like that to put it in their database. If we had the fingernail scrapings though, we could look at the DNA under her fingernails and see if any of it has the same alleles that are on the handle of the knife. But we don't have that. That to me says there's so many questions about this case. Why does evidence keep coming up missing? Why did the police claim that they forgot to put film in the color camera? This Millington Police Department says at trial, well, we didn't have a color camera, we had to borrow our boss's camera. And when we took it to get it, the film developed, we realized we forgot to put film in the camera. That just tells me time and again that there's a problem with this investigation, that they realized there was a problem with this investigation and they had to hide the evidence. I have never felt as strongly about my client's innocence as I do with Pervis Payne. I've worked on a lot of cases. I love all of my clients. I don't want any of my clients executed. I have come to care for and love many men on death row who I know committed some pretty awful crimes. And I don't come out and publicly say they're innocent when I know they're guilty. And I didn't expect to have an innocent client with Pervis Payne, but I do. And there are so many questions in this case, and the court simply cannot fix it. And that's why we have a clemency process, and that's why we are engaging in this campaign for Pervis, because we need our voices to be heard with the governor, because the governor singularly has the power to save this man's life.